Night of the harvest party. After the second goat was killed, its head was removed the same way and given to the men around the fire. They singed and scraped off the hair, and that head joined the other in a bushel box, which was carried away by Beauville. Mackey instructed Stephen to stand by and hold a plastic wash basin for the entrails. Mackey made a cut all the way from the groin down the belly of the first goat, opening its gut. He reached into the cavity, worked his hand inside down toward the neck to free up the gut membrane. He extracted the whole gut pile as one dark mass contained in an iridescent bluish membranous bag, with the intestine still attached like an umbilical cord. Stevie Mon, you see up here we must take care. We must take care. We must not foul the meat with the unclean elements, Mackey said. Mackey reached to the topmost part of the intestine, twisted as one might to separate sausage links. Neville Jarrett stood by, holding two short lengths of cotton string. With these he tied off the end of the intestines and the end of the esophagus. Neville Jarrett held a cloth and a bottle of Ray and Nephew overproof rum. Mackey made a cut from the inside just to the side of the rectum, and cut fully around the rectum to the outside, and pulled out the rectum like a jack-o'-lantern top, careful not to touch any part of the meat with the unclean end. Neville Jarrett cut and tied the end, covered it in a wad of rum-soaked cloth, and tossed the rectum into the fire. Pixley Wilson took the wash basin with the entrails from Stephen and walked down toward the bunkhouses with it. Mackey gutted the second goat the same way. This time the entrails went into a plastic 5-gallon bucket. He explained to Stephen that it is important for the meat to cool quickly. That is why he had gutted the goats first, before skinning them. He said, "The offal keep the body heat, so we cut it out fast." Stephen loved the Jamaican accent. Mackey then skinned each goat, moving the special skinning knife in small circular motions, separating the hide from the meat, all the while peeling off the hide with his other hand. Once started, the hide peeled off neatly like a jacket, leaving the naked, headless goats looking more like meat to Stephen as they hung from the branch. Mackey only took a few minutes to skin each goat. "Now, Stevie Mon, you have done your work for this feast. Thank you, Mon. Now you must go to your wonderful woman. I see you later tonight," Mackey said. "Thanks, that was very interesting. I look forward to tonight's feast," Stephen said. "Yes, Mon," said Mackey, smiling with his toothpick. Stephen walked down to the bunkhouse and saw that Greg Edison and Cindy had arrived. Tracy had introduced herself to them. Greg was unloading 2 kegs of beer from the outdoor crew van. He had driven down to Nashua to pick them up, along with the taps. Cindy was in the bunkhouse dining room talking with Tracy. "Steve, give me a hand with these," Greg called. Stephen went over and took one handle. Greg took the other, and the two of them carried the heavy keg up to the bunkhouse kitchen. Stephen figured there had to be about 1 hour of daylight left. "Been looking forward to this for a long time. Cindy's driving. I'm going to get cocked," Greg said. "Tracy and I rode bikes, so I'm going to get cocked too," said Stephen. "Yeah, I kind of noticed. That girl, she said she came here with you. She's beautiful. Where'd you find that?" "Well, I've known her for a few years, from school. Are you two, are you boyfriend, girlfriend?" "I think so. We had dinner with the Jamaicans a few weeks back, but I think she's a vegetarian, and she doesn't drink. Greg's face crumpled to a grimace. At this same time, Tracy and Cindy were talking in the dining room. "So what do you think of Stephen?" Tracy asked. "He's okay. I've only met him a few times. Greg brought him to our house after he'd had some accident. Greg said he could have been killed, but he wasn't hurt at all," Cindy said. "What kind of accident?" Tracy asked. "They were pulling down trees and the tractor slipped. Stephen's arm was caught in the chain and he was dragged down the hill with the tree. He wasn't hurt, but I could tell he was in some kind of shock or something," Cindy said. "I see," Tracy said. "He helped us kill the broilers. We had 50. He was a big help that day," Cindy said. "Broilers?" Tracy asked. "Chickens. How about you? What do you think of Stephen?" Cindy asked. "I first met him when I was a freshman at New Dartford High. He was a senior. That was about a year and a half ago. I'm friends with his friend's sister," Tracy said. "Are you two a thing?" Cindy asked. "I don't know. I like him. I know he likes me, but I don't know what's going to become of him in the world," Tracy said. "Become of him? What does that even mean?" Cindy asked. "Well, he's 20 now. I'm a junior in high school," Tracy began. Tracy just then realized that what she was about to say would be insulting to Cindy. She was about to say that she didn't think Stephen could make a living working at the orchard, that he had to move on to something better, a real job, but she had to answer the question. "Well, Stephen has always been a little weird. He's a very nice guy. To tell the truth, I don't know whether he's a genius or an idiot," she said. "I see. Yes, he is a little weird, kind of spaced out, but I've never met a guy who wasn't. I don't think he's ever violent." "You don't ever want that," Cindy said. "No, I don't ever want that," Tracy said. Anyway, you're in high school. Relax. If you like him, be his girlfriend. Don't worry about the rest of it," Cindy said. Tracy considered her own life, her parents, the divorce. Cindy had said that she'd left her 2 sons at home, that she was relieved that after all these years her boys were old enough not to need a babysitter. Tracy saw that Cindy was a confident and intelligent woman. Her husband Greg did the same job as Stephen. They were raising 2 children together. They even raised chickens. She realized that her parents' divorce had had a greater effect on her than she'd admitted to herself. She knew she wouldn't have been so hesitant about Stephen had her parents' divorce not revealed that love can evaporate. "Thank you for saying that," Tracy said. She resolved to herself that she would be Stephen's girlfriend. Stephen and Greg entered the room carrying the first keg. They put it down on the floor and rested for a few seconds. Stephen introduced Tracy to Greg. Then they left again to bring in the other keg. "Aren't they great?" "Greg is afraid Stephen's going to leave. He hopes he'll stay," Cindy said. Tracy herself wanted to get out of New Hampshire as soon as she could. That would have to be after she graduated high school. Where she wanted to go, she didn't know, but she for sure didn't want to stay. But listening to Cindy, she realized that this world of the orchard was unknown to most of the people who lived in the area. She had not known about it. She'd always known there were several orchards around, but she never knew that Jamaicans came here to pick the apples and bring with them so much of their culture. Ted and Doreen Castro walked into the kitchen, greeted Cindy, and introduced themselves to Tracy. "I heard that Stephen had brought a nice girl here to have dinner a while ago. She must be you," Doreen said to Tracy. Tracy answered, "Yes, that would be me." I was out taking a walk, and Stephen drove by on the tractor and offered me a ride down to here." Doreen smiled and beamed at her husband, enthusiastic for what she hoped this to be the beginning of. "Isn't she wonderful?" she said. Tracy noticed that everybody was very polite and that the atmosphere at the party was very pleasant. Stephen and Greg arrived at the door with the second keg. They pushed the screen door open against its spring, holding the handles of the heavy keg. Ted Castro held the door for them. "Thanks," Stephen and Greg said at the same time. "Of course, gentlemen," said Ted Castro. Having brought in the kegs, Stephen and Greg joined Tracy, Cindy, Ted, and Doreen Castro at one of the tables. Reggae music commenced from the first bunkhouse, audible through the open doorway to the dining room. That's right. Clive Edmonds shouted out a rap in his Jamaican accent. No microphone, but a fine dance hall DJ nonetheless. He introduced the first song of the night. Stephen had heard Pixley Wilson singing that same song in the orchards. "Send me the pillow that you dream on." A woman's voice crackled soothingly from the 45 RPM vinyl disc. Stephen had never heard the song except for when Pixley had sung it, and didn't know who it was by. The beautiful voice continued, "So, darling, I can dream on it too." A galvanized steel tub, borrowed from a dairy farm down the hill, had been placed in the dining room to accommodate the beer kegs. It was usually used for watering cattle. Greg and Stephen hefted the kegs, one each by themselves, into the tub. They were both trying to show off their physical strength in mock competition. With the kegs in place, a procession of Jamaicans entered the room carrying 20-pound bags of ice. George Burke wore wraparound sunglasses and a fedora hat with a long pheasant feather tucked into its brim ribbon. He presented a face of defiant dignity, chin held high, lips pursed, stubble beard. He walked over to the beer kegs, slung his bag of ice to the floor, took a ratchet knife from his pocket, swung it open like a switchblade, and cut off the top of the ice bag. The ease of the cut revealing the sharpness of the blade. He retracted the blade and slipped the knife back into his pocket. He squatted, grabbed the ice bag, rose up quickly, tilting his head to the onlookers, employing the pheasant feather to great theatric effect. The cascade of ice cubes into the metal tub rang, reminiscent of steel drums, the sound mixing with the music. Then, without a word, he turned, stuffed the empty ice bag in the 55-gallon miscible oil drum that served as a garbage can, and went into the bunkhouse where the music was. A ratchet is a kind of switchblade knife, but with no spring. It must be swung forcefully to flip the blade into position. It has a ring on the pivot end, worn on the middle finger as a ring to prevent the weapon from being dropped in a fight. It is ubiquitous in Jamaica. It is used primarily for knife fighting. Pixley Wilson walked in silently, standing tall, ice bag over his shoulder. No affected style. He looked squarely at every face who was watching. His eyes held wide open, first to Ted Castro, then Doreen. The music continued from the bunkhouse, from which slaps of high five could be heard congratulating George Burke as he entered the bunkhouse. Pixley Wilson set his ice bag on the floor, took out his own ratchet, opened it calmly as one would a common pocket knife, and faced the people in the room. He locked eyes on Stephen. "Stevie Mon, wherever you go in this world, please remember me." Then he looked into Tracy's face. There were no words either way, but Pixley Wilson pursed his lips in a look that conveyed seriousness. He moved on to Greg and Cindy. They sat silently. Pixley turned back to the ice bag, bent down to cut it open, stood, folded the knife and returned it to his pocket, lifted the bag to pour the ice into the tub. He faced them again, focusing on Stephen. I know this world was made by people other than you, and you have worked hard to make our time here as pleasant as possible. Thank you. But Stevie Mon, I must tell you, remember wherever you may go, that in this time at the orchard, you worked with men who receive 44 cents a bushel to pick the apple. Many years from now, you remember this night. You remember what it means. Then he went into the bunkhouse. Next in line, a bag of ice on his shoulder, was Stedman Johnson. At his age, Stephen considered to be able to carry such a weight was remarkable, but Preacher Johnson carried it effortlessly, strolling into the dining room. Ted Castro got up to help. Preacher Johnson needed no help, but accommodated Ted Castro's gesture. Together, they carried the ice over to the tubs, opened it, and dumped it in. Ted Castro returned to Doreen's side, and Stedman Johnson faced the assembled onlookers. He addressed Ted and Doreen. Many years ago, I first come to this orchard, to Rock Mountain Orchards. It is part of my life. It has become something I look forward to. But the time comes near that my name will no longer appear on the roster of this team. It is in God's hands now, as it always has been. He looked at Stephen. Young Stephen, Saint Stephen, I believe the Lord calls you. You will wander the world, and we cannot know where you go or what you see. Your call is not known to you now. Wait. I cannot tell you your call, but I do tell you, you will know it when you feel it. When that happens, do not ignore it. Stevie Mon, promise me that. Yes, I promise you that. I will answer my call, Stephen said. Preacher Johnson then faced Tracy Bass. Miss Tracy, you also have a special calling. I only meet you once before. I see that you are young. You impress me that you live by the principle of eat no meat and drink no alcohol. I've heard of it. He took off his hat, careful not to ruffle the pheasant feather, and bowed to her. Still stooped in his bow, he looked up with a smile. I must confess, I do eat the meat, and I do partake of the rum spirits. I follow the Bible. It is my guide. You also have a guide. You and Stephen too strive to make a world in which the lion lay down with the lamb. It is my hope that it come to be. He rose from his bow, hat back in place, and exited the bunkhouse to the music. Arthur Broccoli tapped the first keg. People filed in from the bunkhouses to line up for beer. Stephen joined them in the line. One by one they filled their cups. Stedman Johnson brought a cup of the exotic refreshing drink with the fruit cocktail for Tracy. Tracy, dear, this is our popular drink for hard work in Jamaica. It mostly no alcohol, just a tiny bit of Guinness, like cream in coffee. Will you try it? He asked. Yes, thank you. She took the cup and held it with the others, all waiting until the last man filled his cup. That was Altamont Powell. When Altamont Powell had filled his cup, he turned to face Ted Castro. Then everybody faced Ted Castro, who, Stephen observed, was expected to make a speech. Stephen knew that there had been parties just like this every year for many years. He felt privileged to be a part of it. He also felt a little proud to be the one who brought Tracy to this event. Tracy stood by Stephen's side. Ted Castro smiled, but Stephen detected that it was not the same kind of smile he usually had. Ted Castro had something grave on his mind, Stephen could see. The music stopped. Okay, I'm just going to have a sip of coffee here just a second. Okay, the music stopped. Ted Castro began. And so here we are at the end of another harvest. Let us drink to the season. Everybody raised their cups to one another in cheers. Before I begin, I want you all to know how grateful I am for the hard work you have done. I'm speaking to all of you, Jamaicans and everybody else, indoor crew and outdoor crew. He paused, looking at the faces facing him. Stephen realized that public speaking is a skill in itself, whatever it is one has to say. Ted Castro continued. I also was a much younger man when I first met Altamont Powell, Stedman Johnson, Beresford McPherson, and Wilson Beauville, and the rest of you who know who you are. I have grown to regard you all as friends. I hope for all of you to enjoy good health and good fortune in the years to come. This has been a good harvest in terms of both quality and quantity. Also, this has been a good harvest season in terms of the congenial atmosphere I have observed and enjoyed, to which all of you have contributed. I would like to be able to reward you all commensurate with your efforts, but that is not possible. I have tried to negotiate a pay raise with the owners of this orchard, but I was not successful. Ain't never gonna happen. Levin know he got us by. Clive Edmonds shouted from the doorway. He stopped himself mid-sentence. An uncomfortable silence followed. Stephen remembered his confrontation with Clive Edmonds that day in the beginning of the harvest. He knew that while Edmonds might have been wrong about Americans not needing to work for money, he was right to speak out against the refusal of a raise. Stephen remembered when Levin had visited them at the orchard, when Edmonds had overheard Levin talking about what a simple life the Jamaicans had. Altamont Powell spoke. Now we turn our attention to the main purpose of this night, and that is to begin the festivities. He snapped his fingers and pointed to the men gathered at the record player, at which they lowered the needle on a record. It was the same record as they had started before. The words continued. That you dream on, don't you know that I still care for you? The woman's voice singing on the record was sweet and melancholy. Everybody was dancing to the song. When it was over, Stephen turned to Tracy, and she faced him. He put his hands on her shoulders, nervously, unsure if it was the right thing to do. They looked into each other's eyes. An indescribable feeling stirred in them, a kind of energy, almost like an electric current that paralyzed them, made them unable to speak. Doreen Castro broke the spell. She asked Tracy and Stephen if they knew that song. I only know it from Pixley singing it. He said it's by Peter Tosh, Stephen said. Tracy had never heard the song before. Doreen laughed. Well, maybe Peter Tosh sang it, I don't know. But that song is by Hank Lachlan. The woman singing this version is named Cynthia Schloss. Do you all know Hank Lachlan? Stephen said he didn't. Oh, Hank Lachlan is great. You know the Grand Ole Opry. You might be too young to know, but it's still on the radio. I know the Grand Ole Opry. My mother loves that, Tracy said. Doreen looked at Tracy with such a look of love that everybody watching could see that she hoped Stephen would marry Tracy, and that forever after, Stephen and Tracy would always be there. Then there would be children. But the party was happening, so Doreen, Stephen, and Tracy had to turn their attention to the happenings of the party. The music continued. Anton Castro. Anton Castro had two one-bushel boxes full of records that the Jamaicans had given him over the years. Some of them were from 20 years before, some more recent. The Jamaicans took turns being the DJ. Pixley Wilson sang and played guitar to many of the records, while other men sang harmony. The aroma of exotic food wafted in from the kitchen. Stephen had never eaten goat meat before. Anton and Brock had said that the curry was good, not so unusual for New Englanders, but the soup. In the months leading up to the harvest, Stephen had heard about this mysterious soup. The more he'd heard about it, the more mysterious the soup became. Brock had said, "If you eat the soup, you are not only a man, you are a Jamaican." Stephen recalled that while he was walking down to the bunkhouse after Mackey had dismissed him from goat killing duty, Stephen had seen Joe Vassell and George Burke rinsing out the intestines of the goats. As Stephen walked by, Joe Vassell had muttered, "Yes, yes, Stevie Mon, tonight be big happiness." The intestines were very long, maybe 30 feet. The two men had attached the ends of the intestines to the outdoor water faucet of the upper bunkhouse. They'd tied string around to seal it to the threads of the faucet. The water flowed through the intestine like a garden hose. The faucet was near enough a patch of blackberry briars that they were able to squirt the water onto the plants from the intestine. That had been earlier in the day. The intestines would be in the soup. Finally, the food was ready. In the dining room, Mackey and Neville Jarrett had set everything up. There were the picnic tables with their disposable tablecloths. One table had stacks of plates, bowls, and silverware, a big pot of peas and rice, another pot with goat curry, or curry goat, as the Jamaicans called it. A big pot of peas and rice, and another pot with goat curry, or curry goat, as the Jamaicans called it, rested on the kitchen counter. In the corner of the dining room was the great steel pot, about 3 feet wide, that held the soup. The soup Stephen had heard about all season. It rested on a makeshift metal frame welded together from scrap steel. Neville and Mackey ladled out the food. Stephen took his place in line with Tracy. There was a salad and sliced apples that Tracy could eat. She also ate the peas and rice. Stephen scooped out peas and rice onto his plate, some salad, and then went to Neville Jarrett for the curry goat. And after that, he went to Mackey for the soup. Mackey and his toothpick grinned. He lifted the pine board lid from the cauldron, and when the billows of steam cleared, Stephen saw the heads of the two goats, horns and all, floating in the soup. Skin and meat peeled back from teeth and bone. Hard-boiled eyes glowed blue. Stephen nodded to Mackey, and Mackey filled Stephen's bowl. Doreen waved Stephen and Tracy to her table. They sat down next to Ted and Doreen Castro. Stephen contemplated the soup he knew he must eat. "Stephen, how is your mother?" Ted Castro asked. "She's doing okay, all things considered. She says it's not that bad. Dialysis, that is." "Thanks for asking. And thanks for trying to get us all a raise," Stephen said. "I appreciate your thanks. To tell the truth, it frustrates me to see the pattern," Ted Castro said. "What pattern?" Stephen asked. "Well, my father worked here. I have worked most of my life here. In his time and my time, and probably my children's time, as they are grown now, this has been a good place to work." Stephen said, "It's still a good place to work. It's a congenial atmosphere, just like you said." "That's all good and well, but the pattern I'm referring to is in economics," Ted Castro said. "Economics?" Stephen asked. I'm talking about the long-term viability of the jobs this orchard provides. Do you understand what I mean by viability? Stephen knew the word as it is used to describe seeds that are mature enough to germinate successfully. He extrapolated. You mean the jobs being able to pay enough money for the workers to be able to buy a house and raise a family? Stephen said. That is precisely what I mean. You see, the economy in this country is changing, as I'm sure you know. Prices for houses and other things are rising, but not the price of apples. That reality is a constraint on what wages we can pay and what benefits we can provide, Ted Castro said. Doreen interrupted. Okay, enough shop talk already. There's a party on. Did you know that poor Tracy here is a vegetarian? Dear girl. But I guess that might come in handy on a night like this. Tracy smiled, trying not to roll her eyes. Stephen understood that while he had been talking with Ted Castro, she'd been obliged to make a tedious explanation to Doreen. Stephen found that the soup was not so bad after all. He would not have been put off had he not seen the heads floating in the pot. Judging it objectively on its own merits, he actually liked it. He got a second helping, which earned him a round of applause from the Jamaicans. Having finished eating, they all got up to join the party. Stephen and Tracy went into the bunkhouse where the music was playing. Stephen had another beer. Jesse was dancing along with his girlfriend and several of the Jamaicans. Jesse had brought some of his records to the party. This song was Don't You Want Me Baby by Human League. By 10 o'clock, Ted and Doreen had left, and many of the Jamaicans had gone to their bunks. As festive an occasion as it was, the routine of getting up early and going to bed early for so long had made it difficult to stay up late, even for the younger people. You still having fun? Stephen asked Tracy. Yes, still having fun, but I'm tired, and I think a lot of people here are also tired, Tracy said. Want to head out? Stephen said. Yeah, I'm ready to go, Tracy said. Stephen and Tracy said their goodbyes to the people who were still up. Stephen noticed that Greg and Cindy had already gone without announcing their departure. Stephen and Tracy got their bicycles and walked them out to the road. That was a wonderful time. Is it okay if we just walk our bikes? Tracy said. Sure, Stephen said. They started walking down Leesboro Center Road, down the hill toward New Dartford. Stephen remarked that it was the first waxing moon after the harvest moon. Frosted grass glowed blue as St. Elmo's fire in the rows between the apple trees on each side of the road. Stephen, Tracy said. Yeah? That was the most interesting thing I've ever seen in my life. Thank you for bringing me, Tracy said. Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure what to expect. I knew they were going to kill the goats. I knew that you were a vegetarian. You still want to be a vegetarian after that? Stephen joked. That's a pretty funny thing to say, she said, without laughing. Anyway, Stephen said, I was just afraid because the reason why I wanted to ask you to come is because... They stopped walking and faced each other. He hesitated to speak and mustered his courage to say it. It's because I've loved you ever since that night I saw you at the mom's house. Do you remember when we were all trying to sing? Oh God, I remember that. Yes, I do remember that night. We were all trying to sing The Boxer by Simon and Garfunkel, but nobody remembered the words. And you made up those funny lyrics, she said. When we kissed back in September, I felt like, he fished for words, I had really found what I'd been looking for. His voice lowered to a whisper. I want it to always be that way, Stephen said. Tracy knew this was a critical moment in her life. She knew that if Stephen kissed her, this time it would go further. This time she would really be committing herself to a relationship. They stood in the road, holding their bicycles up. "What will I do in life?" he asked. "I don't know. Do people ever really know what they're going to do in life?" she said. He thought for a few seconds. "Well, you know how badly I did in school. Anyway, sometimes I worry that school, whatever I might have felt about it, might turn out to have been an accurate indicator of my ability to get along in life," he said. "Wow, I've never seen self-doubt in you before," she said. "Really?" He said it. He hesitated to say it. Then he said, "I've always been full of self-doubt ever since the first grade. The first time I did first grade, twice." He looked up to the sky. "If I had a piece of land, I know how to grow food." "Of course, you work at a farm," Tracy said. "It's not self-doubt. I don't doubt my own sensibilities. It's just the way the world is set up is so lousy. I know it could be better," Stephen said. How would you make it better?" she asked. I don't know how to make it better, but I have an idea of how it could be better, if somehow it could be done." "Have you ever heard the slogan, 40 acres and a mule?" He asked. "No." "Well, you know the Civil War. You know about Sherman's march to the sea?" "Yes, when they burned a 50-mile swath through Georgia to the sea. Here we are back in school," Tracy said. "That's right," Stephen said. "My father told me once that General Sherman gave orders that all that land they captured was to be divided up into 40-acre lots and given to freed slaves. And I guess they would each get a mule too," Stephen said. "I hadn't heard that part," Tracy said. "Wouldn't that have been great if they had done that? Of course, they never did give anything to the freed slaves, not that I know of. Imagine what it could have been like, a society centered on small, self-sufficient farms. Some people could do the farming, other people could make things and sell them. People could have done what they wanted. If I had 40 acres somewhere, what could I... That would be so great," Stephen said, picturing it all in his mind. "That's a wonderful vision," Tracy said. "You just have to keep building up your skills to where you can finally put them to use on exactly the type of community you describe. It really is a good vision. Please, you have to pursue that ideal," Tracy said. Tracy really did like Stephen. She thought his ideas of how a community could be arranged were very good. Nobody else ever talked about things like that. She remembered that in school, Stephen had mostly been funny. He had been the class clown, always joking, always defiant, bragging that he didn't do homework. He had better things to do. She had thought that he was funny. Here, standing with him in the night, feeling her cheeks reddening in the frosty air, glad for the darkness, it occurred to Tracy that people behave so as to obscure what they perceive to be their weak points, that swagger is bluff. Stephen's behavior in school had been his effort to conceal from others his inability to do the work assigned to him. "School is no indicator of anything. It's just a place where we are all standardized and evaluated. If you don't fit the mold, you get bad grades. That doesn't mean anything," Tracy said. "Can we put down our bikes for a few minutes?" he asked. They set their bicycles on the side of the road and looked at each other. He seeing the moonlight on Tracy's face. She seeing Stephen's face silhouetted against the sky. Tracy feared what would happen next. She had real affection for Stephen. She knew it had been no accident that she'd been walking up there on that September day almost 2 months ago, that she'd expected Stephen would drive by on the tractor. Stephen did not know that. That same night, when they kissed, it had been the most wonderful feeling she'd ever known. But it felt dangerous. She would lose control over her life if she gave in to those feelings. She felt sorry that she'd toyed with his affections, and now she was afraid to give him what she had promised. Stephen slowly lowered his face toward hers, and for a moment they paused. He had hoped so much for this moment to arrive. Their lips were about to touch. Tracy realized that she had let it go too far. She had to stop it. Stop it! Stop it! Her body was not responding to her commands. She wanted to say something, but no words came out. It was about to happen. His lips touched hers, and a wave of emotion swept over her, so beautiful, so shockingly powerful. She mustered a desperate push from her brain to overcome her desire, and was able to pull her face back. It broke the spell. She looked into his face. They stood blankly. Stephen, I don't know what will become of you. You are a wonderful man. You will find a woman, the right woman for you. But that woman is not me. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. She struggled to get the words out between sobs. I have to go home, she said, sobbing. Stephen stood in the road, stunned. Oh God, what have I done? I'm sorry. He didn't know what to say. You have done nothing wrong. Oh dear, it's not you. I'm so sorry. I have to go home. Tracy picked up her bicycle, quickly got on, and rode into the darkness. Stephen listened to Tracy's sobbing disappear in the distance. Silence returned. He looked at the sky and saw thin clouds drifting past the moon, and remembered lying on the roof of the fort, looking up at the same night sky years ago. Same moon, same clouds. His face was wet with tears. He had no rag to wipe them off. He did his best with the sleeve of his coat, but it was made of wool, and just spread the tears around without absorbing them. The walk back to his parents' house would take about an hour. He realized that he could ride his bicycle home in about 20 minutes, and normally he would have. But not this night. This night he just walked. He stopped trying to wipe away the tears. A few more minutes into the walk, he stopped walking and knelt in the road, leaning on his bicycle, and let loose with his own sobbing fit. He didn't try to stop it. He just tried to do it as quietly as possible. When it subsided, he stood and looked again at the sky. Up the hill in the distance, he heard a dull thump. It reminded him of the sound of a half-full can of beer thrown into the woods by somebody trying to pretend that he'd finished the can. He remembered Billy Crow doing that years ago. You've got a lot to think about, my friend, Stephen said to himself. He thought about why Tracy had rejected him. You know the reason why. You're a pretty weird boy, Stephen Stroh. Okay, that's the end of chapter 11. Okay.